All right, everyone. This is Parker, and Mason's here with me as well.
Howdy.
And we have a great show today. So, boy, there's a lot to talk about. Now I understand why talk show hosts say that at the start of every show. So, basically, what we're going to discuss today is the infrastructure bill in general, but particularly as it relates to the nonsense that is being called infrastructure so it can be included in the infrastructure bill for reasons that no one can explain on terms that make sense. And that's particularly pointed at the moment because Pete Buttigieg, transportation secretary to President Joe Biden, is is he still on paternity leave?
I believe so. He
As far as we're aware, still on paternity leave to care for his newborn
he has
twins.
been on leave from his job since August after adopting a child.
Really? It's been
So
that? All
yes.
right, we're going to get into that. Wow. Okay. Um, yeah, so I just want to start with this. Kirsten Gillibrand is not responsible for the whole of the ridiculousness in this discussion, but she certainly contributed to it with this tweet. And I wanted to start with it because it's from April 7th, 2021. Paid leave is infrastructure. Child care is infrastructure. Caregiving is infrastructure. Well, no, they're not. None of those actually are infrastructure. I should have pulled up the definition of infrastructure. Let's just do that right quick. Infrastructure is an
In
underlying base or foundation, especially for an organization or systems, as it would be used in a government setting. The second definition is probably better. The basic facilities, services, and installations needed for the functioning of a community or society, such as transportation and communication systems, water and power lines, and in public institutions, including schools, post offices, and prisons. Returning to our friend Kirsten for a moment, paid leave, childcare, and caregiving would not very well fit that
no,
definition.
yeah, they don't fall into any of those categories. Basically, when I think of the word infrastructure is just buildings, buildings, roads, anything. Basically, anything that you see in front of you. You know, when you go out driving, and anything that would power the things you see in front of you. So a power grid, water lines, stuff like that. That's what infrastructure is. Not like abortion law or none of that's infrastructure. It's definitively not infrastructure. So you know,
Yeah, I'd wholeheartedly agree with that. It's entirely ridiculous to assert that. I mean, the replies to this tweet are actually pretty amusing in demonstrating its absurdity. Somebody suggested I might be able to find it, I might not. Um, but essentially, if we're just going to define anything, I scrolled past the replies, didn't I? Yeah, there it is. Um, Essentially, if anything's infrastructure, then let's just here you go. Oh, Gad, sad. I didn't know that he was in the replies. He said exactly. Violent crime is climate change. Open borders is climate change. Defund the police is climate change. People menstruate is climate change. Voting fraud is climate change. Somebody else said Botox and plastic surgery are infrastructure. And that's honestly about as consistent of an argument. This is the one I was looking for. School vouchers are infrastructure. Second Amendment protections are infrastructure. Border walls are infrastructure. Wait.
wait,
Yeah,
that's
so
hilarious.
let's talk about infrastructure. Let's actually talk about things that might potentially fit some definition of infrastructure that's been accepted for longer than about 4 weeks of DNC nonsense.
And by the way, I mean, this is not even the. I'm sure this is not even the goofiest shit you could find in that infrastructure bill. I'm sure there's something even crazier in there. That's like completely unrelated to anything that remotely has to even tangentially do with infrastructure. Like
Pakistani gender studies or something.
Yeah, some random bullshit like that is definitely in there. You know it is.
It always is.
I haven't. I will admit I have not read the full $3.5 trillion plan, and I don't really intend to. I just kind of respond to what everyone else is saying. That is a problem in and of itself. The fact that it's not even reasonable for people to read these things in their entirety before they vote on them.
Okay, I want to
So,
touch on this. We should talk about that more in detail sometime, but I think there should be a rule in Congress that the whole of the bill, the entire text of the bill, must be read on the floor of the chamber before it is voted on. And you can't vote on it unless you're present for the entire reading.
I would agree wholeheartedly. There was it's funny because this was done on a recent bill. Some Republican was like filibustering on some bill that I forget what it was, and they were just reading it out loud for all of Congress, and most people left. I think like Ted Cruz stayed for a while, and some others, but like most left, even Republicans left. And it's like this person got like mocked. I wish I could remember what it was about. It was probably less than a year ago.
It
Do
just
you remember what I'm talking
illustrates.
about?
No, I don't, but I do know that. I mean, if you're familiar with filibusters, you know that very often filibusters essentially they just after a certain amount of time you can say whatever you want. There's a certain it's like 2 hours you have to talk about the bill and then you can just say whatever you want. And so often they'll start reading. I mean, Ted Cruz read Green Eggs and Ham famously.
Yeah,
The phone book has been read on the Senate floor to filibuster. But at this point, you could literally just read the bill well past the time
yeah,
limit. I mean, it's like 4,000 pages. It's not conceivably possible for you to be awake long enough to read the entire thing. So that's not even a problem anymore to have to read or to have to speak rather for 2 hours until you get into the real meat of the filibuster. You just keep going. Just start at the first page and just go until you have to pee too bad to keep talking.
yeah.
Anyway,
Enacting a rule that that would force them to read the whole thing would have a lot of good benefits. You know, like it wouldn't even just be one benefit of making sure they read what they're signing off on. It'd be like, obviously they don't want to read 4,000 pages, so they'd end up making smaller bills as a result. So less work,
which is what they
more
should be.
readability, more accountability to the people because people can actually read this in a reasonable amount of time. Stuff like that, it has a bunch of benefits to making them read shit out loud. I would also just like introduce some type of legislation to make sure bills are X length and no longer, whether that's 10 or 50 pages or what have you,
You wouldn't even
whatever we
need that.
determine.
If they had to listen to
Yeah.
the reading, they'd change their strategy real quick. But
Mhm.
that's a whole separate issue we should get into sometime. But
Yeah.
I wanted to break down
Mhm.
a little bit this tweet in particular. I mean, this is a great place to start, but it is not at all. Um,
Exhaustive.
well, it's certainly not exhaustive. It's it's actually illustrative of the kind of nonsense that's in the bill in the first place. So let's just start with the top. Transportation. Transportation is absolutely infrastructure. It is. I'm sure that this $621 billion includes a bunch of things that are not necessary. Here you go, limiting greenhouse gas emissions. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but I'm very sure that there's a bunch of nonsense in there, like, I don't know, assassinating a whole industry or something. Just a lucky guess based on the last Democrat administration in this country. But here you go, home care services and workforce. It's not infrastructure. It's not. How can a service be infrastructure? It's like antithetical to the no. Infrastructure is a noun.
Hmm.
Moving on, manufacturing actually could be reasonably argued to be infrastructure, so I'll just give them that one.
So we're at 900 billion, right?
Housing
Infrastructure.
actually
Sure.
is infrastructure. We could
What's
get
that?
into the federal relevance of housing, but
So was that 1,100 billion or whatever? I'm not even gonna try to
yeah, we're
add it up.
not. Don't even.
It'd be easier to add up the shit that's not.
If the senators aren't doing the math, then I'm not going to bother to.
Yeah.
Research and development, it depends on what it's for. Oh, perfect. His plan would also aim to eliminate racial and gender. Yeah. Yeah. Right. That's infrastructure.
Racial
Equity.
and gender inequities. That's an important word too. They
Yeah.
don't say inequalities; they say inequities.
Stole the words
Which
out of my
tells you they're
mouth.
trying to. It tells you they're trying to, fix the alleged gender pay gap and stuff like that. Stuff that basically the difference between inequities and inequalities sounds like a trivial one, but it's actually very important for policy like this. The difference is that inequities are basically difference in outcome, and inequality is difference in, I guess you could say, starting point. So, like, inequality would be, um, is
Outcome
that right?
versus inequality is equality. Equality is equality of opportunity, and equity is
Yeah,
equality of outcome.
opportunity.
And that's a whole separate.
Yeah,
We
so
should do that as a separate podcast sometime, actually, because that's a whole hour-long discussion if you really
that's
flush it out.
basically the long and short of it is inequities. Yeah, it's equality of outcome, which means, like, I'm making $50 per hour, and my neighbor next to me that's disabled is making $50 per hour, and my um, female neighbor is making $50 per hour as well. We're all making $50 per hour, whereas inequality has to do with, like, a, a bunch of things. Anyways, we can move on. But inequality, yeah, it's a little more broad.
This is real infrastructure, digital infrastructure. Schools are real, unfortunately, federally relevant infrastructure, although not constitutionally. And water is actually infrastructure, so I'm going to concede those points.
Hmm.
Workforce development. What's that mean? It means helping dislocated workers, assisting underserved groups, there it is again, and getting students on career paths before they graduate high school. Whether that's a noble cause or not is a whole separate debate that actually might be worth having. It's not infrastructure. Stop lying. Because this is CNN, they're going to get into how they're going to pay for it. Um, and it's, of course, on corporate taxes, of course. Not on you. We would never raise your taxes, dearest voter. Anyhow, so as I mentioned earlier, and Mason knows little bit more about this than myself, so I'll let him run with it a little bit. Actually, a lot of it, because I don't know very much about this. But this issue has exactly the issue in particular of what is infrastructure has become pointed again because Pete Buttigieg is on paternity leave and apparently has been for a while now. So that, to return to our friend Kirsten's tweet from April, that'd be paid leave and child. Actually, it'd be all three. It's a perfect trifecta. So, Kirsten Gillibrand confirmed profit. Anyhow, so
April 7th.
this this Pete Buttigieg issue has been controversial for reasons I don't entirely understand. I'm actually just going to shut up and let you run it with it, Mason. Tell us a story about Mr. Buttigieg.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know the whole story either. I've just kind of been reading about this throughout the day, and it's been kind of a crazy one. Basically, Pete Buttigieg is gay. If you don't know that, he's gay, and then he's a part of the Biden administration. He's the Secretary of Transportation, I believe. Yes. Um, and so today he spoke out about his decision to take paternity leave, which he's been on since August, apparently. And it got a lot of people talking about it, specifically conservative commentators like Tucker Carlson and I believe Steven Crowder as well. Um, Tucker Carlson, um, let's see what he said. It's in the article somewhere. Hmm,
Pete Buttigieg had.
he said,
Excuse me. Go ahead.
uh,
Pete Buttigieg has been on leave from his job since August after adopting a child. Paternity leave, they call it, trying to figure out how to breastfeed. No word on how that went.
So that's Tucker Carlson being his snarky self. Um, and then, Pete Buttigieg had his response or whatever. And then over on the other side, Steven Crowder. I'll give you the link. Actually, I didn't give you this link before, but you can pull it up because I just found that right before we started. Steven Crowder essentially said fathers don't need paternity leave and they're weaklings if they take it. And this Washington Examiner article says no, Steven Crowder, fathers who take paternity leave are not weak, inferior males. So, anyways, a lot of conservatives attacking this from the angle of if you take paternity leave, you're weak, you're inferior. Um, my biggest issue with this entire paternity leave argument, and I'm not sure why more conservatives aren't talking about it, is one, it has nothing to do with infrastructure, and two, why does the government need to mandate anything about paternity leave? Why is that not just left up to the employer? You know, why is this a part of Biden's infrastructure bill in the first place? And I'm kind of
Ooh,
baffled with
hold
the
on.
response from conservatives.
I want to clarify this.
Hmm.
The Washington Examiner says their combined ultimate message translated to some inexplicable declaration that essentially states, quote, fathers don't need paternity leave and they're weaklings if they take it. So that is not a direct quote.
Oh,
That's
okay.
very
Yeah,
misleading.
I
No,
was.
it's no. I read that in too because I thought. Let me pull up what they actually said.
Yeah, I read
Stephen,
it as in quotes. I looked for the quotation marks. It
exactly.
was the
Yeah, that's
first ones they
that's
had.
bad
It's
journalism,
really misleading.
especially because it's right at
Hmm.
the end of the paragraph like that. But typical.
Hmm.
So here we go. Stephen Crowder said, "As a dad going through this right now, everything Matt Walsh said is accurate." Okay, never mind. Paternity leave is for pussies. Um,
He basically said what
yeah,
they said. He said, but I mean, he said it in a much cruder way.
and Matt Walsh
But it
said
is.
the thing about paternity leave is there isn't much for dad to do when the baby is a newborn, especially if mom is breastfeeding. His main role is to take care of mom as she recovers. But of course, that doesn't apply to Buttigieg, so I'm not sure why he needs paternity leave at all. All right, there you go.
Here's
Sorry.
here's a link to a tweet from Matt Walsh, and it's a. I was going to talk about this one too, but he was one of the conservative commentators that was kind of catching a lot of heat. But what he said, he also had the added um, kind of argument that two men shouldn't be allowed to adopt babies because his stance, and Parker can play this if we want to, but um, his stance was essentially that men don't need to take paternity leave because women are the ones doing all the work. Women, um, as far as the baby is concerned, women are the one breastfeeding, doing all this and that, and he was arguing that basically there's no need for the man to take paternity leave because it really is just all on the woman. Um, and
Which
he
is essentially
clarified,
Crowder's point.
yeah, and then he clarified because the natural question to ask about that is, okay, what if it's two men? He's like, same applies. I don't think two men um, need to take paternity leave either. I think the mother should take paternity leave. And then he went further and said, that's why I don't think two men should be allowed to adopt babies. So that's kind of where that argument came from. But
Yeah,
he had a
there's.
little snarky comeback to the Media Matters people, as you can see on your screen. I think Parker's pulling it up, but
Which one's this? Crowder?
I just sent it to you in
Oh, yeah, no, I
Discord.
pulled that up. Yeah, that was.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot to talk about here. We could get into the whole adoption issue too, because I think that's kind of interesting, but it doesn't have much to do with infrastructure.
Let's.
Um,
I.
yeah, it's just kind of strange to me that they're all kind of commentating on the fact, it's foreseeable because they're conservatives. They want to talk about the whole cultural issue first, but just from a like libertarian perspective, kind of, because I'm kind of libertarian, kind of. Um, you know, my first question is why is the government even handling this in the first place? For one thing, and then second, why is Biden stitching this into the infrastructure bill that it has nothing to do with? So that's basically my synopsis of this. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think there's two things to tackle. The first is, well, let's talk about Pete Buttigieg himself, and then we can talk about the implications, I guess. The transportation secretary probably does not need to be on paternity leave for more than a month. It's
Yeah, that is
been,
pretty extreme.
it's,
So August, it's been 2.5 months now.
yeah, at
Well,
least.
assuming assuming he left early August, if it was August 1st, then he's been out for 2.5 months. If it was August 31st, then it's been more like 1.5 months.
1.5 months
You
is
were between,
already too long, I would say,
yeah,
or at the very least, long enough. Um,
I would
here's
say
here's the
two
deal.
to 3 weeks.
I think that the reason that you have maternity leave is for the point and purpose of breastfeeding. That's the point. Um, Obviously, fathers want to spend time with their infants. Obviously, there's some non-breastfeeding care that is necessary in raising and caring for an infant child. And for that reason, I think that paternity leave makes sense for men to take in general.
We agree there. Then I thought you were going to take the opposite stance. Actually,
No, I'm
um,
pretty pro paternity leave. I mean, I've had coworkers take
I
paternity
think,
leave, and I think that it was a good decision for them and their family. And if if the love of my life just went through the hell of, or at least what certainly seems to be hell of childbearing and and birth, I would not want to work a full 8 hour
mm,
day for like a minute after that, at least a couple weeks, just to help
yeah,
her.
I would, yeah, I would add to that that, like you said, to, if not for the baby, at the very least, just to help her, because she needs as much help as the baby does probably during those stages. She just gave birth, so she's going to be, you know, in a, not at her 100%, you know.
Right.
Um, so
But
I my main thing with this, and it's going to be brief, is that, I don't think it hurts, to paternity leave. Like if your employer offers it, I don't see why you wouldn't take it
yeah,
up, and I
take
don't
it,
see
man.
why these, yeah, I don't see why these, um, you know, conservatives are very so gung ho, about you being like a beta male essentially. If you take paternity leave, I think it's nothing but a good thing. It can't hurt. Maybe it won't do as much good as people claim it does, but it's not going to hurt anything for you to spend time with your kid. So I don't know. So
Yeah,
what do you have to say?
I'm a bit surprised as well
Mm-hmm.
with the fervence of these arguments, but I think they've been exaggerated by the left a little bit. There's not much exaggeration necessary, but I think that they're reading into it this idea that men don't need to spend time with babies at all. And it's like, no, that's not what they said. They said you don't need time off work.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that. I'm saying you don't need 6 weeks off work. I think that
Yeah,
about a month, I'd say 6 weeks is the upper end of what is reasonable.
yeah.
And past that is really not necessary. And
I'm
and
curious what.
I would argue that it's not the duty that you have to your job so much as it is the duty you have to your family to be a good provider, which you can't easily
Right.
be if you are taking. I mean, it depends on what kind of work you do, but not that much because I don't know what kind of work, what kind of job you might have where you are not set back by being gone for 6 weeks. I mean, I'm in software. If I'm gone for 6 weeks, I mean, it's going to take me days, whole days, multiple full work days just to catch up to understand what has been written since I've been gone and what the strategy for where we're going. That's going to be true for the wide majority of jobs, unless they're fairly monotonous, I guess I would say.
It's
And
also worth mentioning, and I agree with what you're saying right now, but it's also worth mentioning that they, a lot of these comments, especially like Crowder, seem to be made slightly in jest, partially. I mean, they
Yeah.
obviously mean what they're saying, but it's not like they're. It kind of bugs me when ABC News and
The
whoever
Washington
else
Examiner.
Washington Examiner start reporting on these things as if they're saying Pete Buttigieg should be fired, or Pete Buttigieg should be this and that, or Pete Buttigieg should be shot and killed in the street. It's like, no, they're just saying that maybe 3 months of paternity leave, going on 3 months of paternity leave is a little bit much, and that we probably don't need that much. I haven't read to the full extent of what all three of them said: Matt Walsh, Stephen Crowder, and Tucker Carlson. But I don't imagine they were being too unreasonable or too harsh. It seems like, um, at least Matt Walsh. I listened to what he had to say, and seemed fairly reasonable. He was just giving his take. You might disagree with that take. You might disagree with the fact that he um, doesn't think two men should be able to adopt babies, but he wasn't,
Yeah, let's
really,
let's
really
touch on that.
passionate about it. He wasn't even. If you watched the video and you didn't play it, did you?
No,
Yeah, I don't think we need to
but
play it
I think there's a
on it.
worthwhile argument there, insofar
I was
as
going to ask you about that too.
insofar
But
as
anyways, just to wrap it up, yeah, none of them seem like particularly like really impassioned about this and really want to like scold Pete Buttigieg. It's more like, why it's kind of ridiculous. They're just saying it's kind of ridiculous. So I think it's a little weird of all these news articles to kind of be so. Not everything is that serious.
Stephen Crowder's
I just want
literally a
to agree on
comedian.
that.
I
Yeah,
mean,
he's literally a comedian. If
like
he calls someone a pussy, that's just like an everyday thing, you know?
it's
I don't know what else to tell you.
he's a comedian before he's a journalist, even though he's a better journalist than most news agencies, and I think that they kind of know it, and maybe they're a little insecure,
Mm.
but that's on them. Insofar
In any
as the
case,
issue of two men adopting, or two women for that matter,
yeah,
adopting children, here's my take. The psychoanalytic and sociological literature, and I'm not going to get into this because we're already pretty short on time for this episode, but that literature is unbelievably clear about the essential nature of having both a male and a female influence during a child's upbringing.
mm,
It is not, and it's not just beneficial. It's not beneficial like giving them Flintstone vitamins is beneficial. It's beneficial like a a good and well balanced diet is beneficial. I mean, it's really really obvious, especially on a sociological level, when you look
mm,
at populations that do not have throughout history as a result of war. That's actually a fantastic example. You look at the kinds of generations that are raised by largely women because men die in war. It's not great, and there's a lot of examples like that even in today's society. I'm rambling a little bit, but it is essential that a child, boy or girl, has both a male and a female role model, and they both suffer when there is a deficiency in one of them. So, legally speaking, what are the implications on that for gay couples that want to adopt? I think that gay couples should be allowed to adopt children, but there should be some plan that is expressly stated prior to adoption for how the child is going to receive opposite sex, who is going to be the role model from the opposite
mm,
sex. So if you and your husband, you're both men, want to adopt a child, you should have to state Here is how we are going to provide this child with a good feminine influence. Here's a woman or some, I think it'd probably be better to be a single person, like one of your sisters or something. Or it could be a neighbor. I honestly don't care who it is. But somebody needs to be, and they should probably be included in this, not just like, here's the name of a woman we know. Like, she should be in agreement that she's going to be invested in this child's upbringing. And she doesn't have to live with you. She just has to be around. And the child needs to know their name and see them on a regular basis. And I understand how wildly offensive this is, especially given the whole trans issue and the like the notion, the asinine notion that sex is and gender are social constructs. They're not. They're absolutely not. They're written in our biology and the biology of all, virtually all, in any case, living things, certainly creatures. So, man, I don't think that you can just avoid that issue because it's offensive. Like there's these are children's lives and their socialization that are on the line. And I think that we're really remiss to just ignore that. So that's my take on that issue.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say before you went into the legality stuff that I agree with you on a philosophical level. I'm just not sure where I stand on the legal level. Like, I think the government has a right to tell you you can't adopt. You know, if you want to adopt, I think it should be left up to probably adoption agencies. You know, it's, that would be my first answer. I haven't thought too much about this, but that'd be my default answer. Um, Yeah, I mean, I agree with I also agree with the notion that kids need both a motherly and a fatherly influence, and it's not just for simple things like shaving. It's not for learning about period products and stuff like that, depending on whether you have a male child or a female child. It's not for the simple things. It's more mothers have different things to teach kids than fathers do,
Right.
and vice versa. It's not a one size fits all kind of thing. You need a little bit of both in your life, I would say.
Yeah, it boils
So,
down
I
to,
don't know how you legislate that. Um,
well, I would just say I tend to agree with you that it shouldn't be a
mhm,
government matter, but it already is. Like CPS already exists. So if we want to abolish
yeah.
CPS, that's fine, I guess. We can talk about that. But if we're going to have it, it needs to do its job.
hmm I definitely agree. If you plan to have that kind of influence, that say it's like Pete Buttigieg and his husband want to have like a female influence for the child, or I think they have two children now, but
Yes.
for the children, um, if they want to have that female influence, they should probably make that clearer too in the adoption process, and that you know female influence should be there. That woman should be there, signing off on all these papers too,
Yeah.
making a pledge that they'll be there for this child. They're going to be as much of a part of it as the two people actually raising the child. So, you know, and I would say the same vice versa. If there's two women
Right.
having an adopted child, wanting a fatherly influence for the child in their lives. Um, yeah, I don't think we're too far on this one. I'm just not sure how you would legislate this, um, and what the solution looks like there. It's an interesting question, for sure.
We're not ready for that discussion, that's for sure, because we aren't actually convinced that men and women are different. But that's essentially what we were getting
As a
at.
society,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Culturally, we're not on that. We're not ready for that. I don't, and it's ridiculous that we're not because it's so obvious. But that's what you're. That's the underlying
hmm
assertion. Is it's not about what women know from their experience and what men know from their experiences, but the inherent and immutable differences of men and women, and that they inherently, regardless of their experience, have different instincts around children, and they're both necessary for the children to be well adjusted and well socialized in their upbringing. And it's very
Yeah.
difficult to make up for that later. That's another really worthwhile point. It's not like
Hmm.
when you're 18, you can catch up on all the socialization you missed when you're 7.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, there's even statistics to back this up. We probably don't have enough time to dig into this, but there's stuff like crime rates and stuff for people that don't have both parents of the household, different things like that. I mean, there's
Yeah.
there's data to back up the fact that you need two parents. They probably should be mother, father. So
Ideally, yes. Well, I think that we covered everything pretty well, don't you?
yeah, I think that should do it.
All right. Well, this has been yet another fantastic episode of the Babel Royale podcast.
A little self-congratulatory there, I would say.
You know,
Thank you,
I
everyone, for
think that was
joining
a
us.
I think it was a fair review. That's what I think.
Sure, sure.
I have
Thank you,
assessed our
everyone, for joining
performance
us.
and found it excellent. Thanks for joining, and we'll talk to y'all soon.